We have talked a lot about security and policing issues in Victoria in recent weeks. Let's catch up with security experts Daniel Lukovic in Sydney and get a perspective on this. Thanks for joining us, Daniel. The first question I have relates to the over-policing, I suppose, that we're seeing from the Victorians. We had riot police going into Victoria markets. We've seen them hassling people for sitting on park benches. And then we had that horrible episode yesterday, the day before yesterday. It wasn't related to COVID, but a policeman stomping on someone's head. Does this tell you that there's something wrong with the culture of Victoria Police?
Well, Chris, Victoria right now is a pressure cooker. I don't think there's many people in Victoria who are enjoying what's going on at the moment. And if you've ever heard the expression, the thin blue line, it's essentially referring to police being all that stands between law and order or a society crumbling into anarchy. And the problem is when you have a pressure cooker environment where the population isn't trusting the government or where there's all sorts of external stress factors, that blue line gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And I think that's what we're starting to see in Victoria, because there are very sensible, ordinary citizens, good tax-paying, employed, upper middle class Melburnians who have never attended a noisy demo in their life, have never got into a fight with police in their life, and they're mad as hell. And we know what comes after that. People decide they're not going to take it anymore, and that's a problem. But it works in the opposite direction as well, because police, for whom I have a lot of support in general, want to be able to go to work, do their job safely, protect the right, uphold the law and come home safely. And of course, if they feel like they're going into a hostile situation, that gets them on edge as well. And so really what we need is a lot more calm, but that takes a lot more than people just standing up at a podium and saying everyone needs to calm down. There needs to be mutual trust. There needs to be good discretion. And unfortunately, that also means the police need to have a good working relationship with ordinary citizens as well, because most people do want to do the right thing. And just like, you know, there's a few bad cops, police overwhelmingly are good. And just like there's a few bad citizens, the citizenry are overwhelmingly good. So I think we just need to restore that sort of mutual level of trust. And unfortunately, a lot of what the Victoria Police has been captured on TV doing is not doing them any favours from a PR perspective.
Now, yeah, you talk about how that resentment can be sort of self-perpetuating on either side, especially implementing rules that no policeman ever expected to implement and no one in the public expected to have to live under. But I've been critical of the tone. You talk about what's coming from the leadership, and especially when you're doing something like having community rules to fight a pandemic. I've been surprised at the tone of the Premier primarily, but other leaders. It's sort of laying down the law. These are the rules. You won't go to your mate's house. We'll be out there. We will get you. We will fine you. Shouldn't it be a more cooperative approach, going back to the phrase we started with, of we're all being in this together?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm aware of one story coming out of Melbourne of a person who was at the shops on Friday night and was approached by police saying, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I'm here to do my Friday night shopping." And they demanded her ID and she showed it to them and they saw, "OK, well, we can see you're within 5 kilometres of where you live, so that's OK," and carry on. And when she got home, police were actually there and busted her for having been out for more than 1 hour. Now, this is probably a person who's never committed a crime in their life, pays their taxes and resents being treated by police that way. But, you know, at the same time, many of those police, without sort of invoking the Nuremberg defence of following orders, fundamentally, they get their instructions from their superior, who gets it from the top, and they in turn get it from the political will. So it's going to get to the point where police find it incredibly frustrating and they're caught between a rock and a hard place. So, yeah, there's a serious leadership problem in Victoria that's making criminals out of ordinary tax-paying citizens, and that's not OK.
Talking about leadership, what did the Victorian quarantine operation miss out on by not having ADF involvement early on?
Sure. Well, by way of comparison, there's been a lot of criticism of the use of private security contractors, but if you look at, say, the New South Wales hotel quarantine, they've had over 65,000 guests come through that program. They've got upwards of 800 security cards deployed daily and over 1.5 million man-hours of work by private security, which is very impressive and has had none of the debacle that Victoria has, whereas in Victoria, there was a total case study in how not to run a security exercise. And so a lot of people are saying, well, we should have had the ADF do it, we should have had the police do it. There's one or two fundamental differences. Now, you don't need ADF or police doing something that a security contractor could do, for example, basically just standing outside a door and calling someone if that door opens. It's not difficult work, but one of the things that the ADF and the police and other combat agencies like that are very good at is a chain of command and knowing who's in charge. Whereas what we've seen from the hotel quarantine inquiry in Victoria so far is it's taken 4 or 5 weeks and they still haven't even got to the bottom of a very fundamental question, which was who's actually running the show here, who's responsible and whose butt can be kicked here. And the real shame of it is when you look at the people who were actually involved, and you know, look, they're good people and they had good intentions, but if you actually review the names of the people for Department of Precincts and Regions or Human Services, these were people who had nothing on their resume even remotely relevant to the work that was currently doing. So they might have organised trade events or New Year's Eve shows and so forth. So some of that came across in the work, for example, buying flowers for detainees on Mother's Day or buying toys for kids, and all that stuff's very lovely, but it's absolutely irrelevant to a public health emergency, which is why we saw things go horribly wrong. And coming back to Victorians being disappointed in their government, one of the biggest shames of this is that those public servants who are on many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, I think we can probably predict they're still going to have a job when all this is over. Whereas as a direct result of ineptitude in the management of that program, for example, allowing subcontractors to subcontractors to subcontractors, there are ordinary Victorians who have lost everything. So the people responsible will have a job, will have a salary, and people who've done nothing wrong will lose theirs. And that breeds tremendous mistrust in government, and I don't see it ending well.
Daniel, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.
That line of command, that's what police or the ADF would have brought to the operation. They still don't know who was really in charge. Fascinating insights there.